Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, I was trying to figure out during tonight's game if the Cowboys are bad, if Dak Prescott is bad, if Mike McCarthy is bad, and how they won the game. Was it just the Chargers chargering?
So certainly some of the things that you have identified as bad are bad, but I will not reveal the secrets to you.
I was amazed watching the end of the first half. And they had 8 seconds left or 14 seconds, whatever it was. They had time left. They had called timeout, presumably. Yeah, presumably to try for a touchdown, like a quick strike, like anybody would in that instance. And instead, they went for a field goal with 3 seconds left. And I don't pretend to be the world's greatest football analyst. Our numbers of, nearly 2 million listens are not because of my analysis. However,
certainly not because of mine.
Listen, it's because of one of us, and it's not my editing. So, based on
first mover advantage, James. I'm always going to say it's first mover advantage.
I uploaded the last episode late Friday morning, Thursday night. Excited, it was all done. We got done early, all excited. Yeah, it turned out that the episode stopped on most of the people's things at 47 minutes, so I had to re-upload it. So that it would
explains the YouTube comments.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. So it's just people are not listening to the show for my editing. I fixed it in time, but there were a couple of stragglers that had to re-listen or re-download, whatever. But yeah. So I don't pretend to be the world's greatest football analyst. However, I don't know of anyone outside of Josh McDaniels who would have thought that was a good idea.
He was very insistent on that timeout being at 8 seconds. That's the thing that was really
or 3 seconds. At 3 seconds, yeah.
It was yeah, okay, bud. You could have done a couple more things.
Yeah, you have Dak Prescott is slowly revealing himself as washed, but I realize your
but
team
it's there. Right.
Your team is terrible in the red zone this year. I get it. Are you trying to just avoid a pick? Is that what you're trying to do?
That stuff bothers me so much because there's no impact to a pick, right? Obviously, when quarterbacks throw end of half interceptions, we hold them against them at the end of the year when we're just counting up the stats or whatever. I think that I don't think they remove them from the PFF turnover worthy plays thing, but I think they should unilaterally just make a decision at some point. Just these obviously don't count. But yeah, there's no there's this momentum thing that sometimes coaches are we can't let them have the momentum coming out of the half. And it's yeah, you can. There's a 12-minute break in the middle. What are they going to do with it? Right. So I don't know. That stuff bothers me because they're yeah, you can't end the half on a loss. And it's but you're choosing to lose. That's not better. Right?
And this is basically a home game. You're in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
you'll be able to shake that off. Although admittedly, I did enjoy watching the two press boxes or the two I say VIP boxes, whatever. I enjoyed watching Michael Irvin realize that Jimmy Johnson was in the other one. And was trying to talk to. I enjoyed that on the broadcast. I did think that was funny.
Yeah, the broadcast being last place I'd expect Jimmy Johnson to be is at a football game.
I don't know if that means exactly what you think it means, Troy Aikman, but you did retire due to hits to the head. So all right.
Troy Aikman was so weird, man. At one point, Joe Buck was "You all right, man? You're different today."
It was a heck of a game. So, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have a game to review. The Vikings won in Chicago. Something that's been happening a lot more the last couple seasons than it did the last 20, so good. But the Vikings were successful, beating one of the worst teams in the league. playing against a backup quarterback for a while. We'll talk about that. And we have the mailbag as well. But before we start, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us financially, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there for $3.50 a month or a little less for the year subscription. You can be one of the cool kids over in the Discord or getting access to the bonus material. The Discord was a fun place this weekend. We had Drawplay Dave come in and drop some exclusive images for our Discord. Yeah, let's go with that. Arif and I were part of an atrocity that went up on Twitter this weekend, and I stand by it as a decision I'm proud of, and Arif 75 cents went toward it too, so we were all happy about that.
As a reward for our participation, Dave committed a secondary related atrocity in the Discord that was very specific to us, so certainly find a way to check that out.
Fantastic. You can check all of this out and more over on the Discord at patreon.com/NorseCode. Special thank you to Charles Wheeler for signing up on Patreon. Thank you so much, and enjoying your posts so far over on the Discord. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you'd like to make a one-time donation, or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up one of the fine pieces of Norse Code merchandise, including the wreath, Christmas socks, the shower curtains, the everything is over there at norsecode.threadless.com. I want to apologize before we start. Arif is a little under the weather. He's going to get a little gravelly as the episode goes on. The stress of the last couple of weeks has really gotten to him. As a result, he's smoking about 2 packs a day. Normally, he'd be doing this in a car or in a garage, but since he has access to neither, he is...
Jesus Christ, man!
He's going to be dealing with this as we record, so apologies if you get the fits or whatever. So, it's been years since I smoked regularly, and I still pretend to ash when I'm stressed. So I get it, dude. I get it.
Great, good,
yeah,
good.
So let's. You're going to be sounding more gravelly than Dusty does after one of these shows. It'll be great. Well, let's get into the review of the game. This is a Vikings win. Not a lot of wins this year. This was an ugly win. This was a victory in Chicago that had all of the things you would expect from a Chicago game. There was wackiness. There was a backup quarterback. There was a missed extra point. There was enough to go around. And I think the first thing we have to do is talk about how often the ball is being dropped in short yardage from Kirk Cousins, and who are we pointing the blame toward?
Okay, yeah. So I looked it up just before the show just to get a kind of a good sense. I was actually answering a different mailbag question, and then I was like, that's kind of interesting. And so I went over to PFF's total year-end grade so far. So we're through week 6. And Kirk Cousins has the most drops of his receivers of any quarterback in the NFL. I think 17. And also he has the highest drop rate of any quarterback with at least 80 pass attempts. So I believe that includes Anthony Richardson, and that's 33 total quarterbacks. 9.7% of his passes end up on the ground through no fault of his own. They are otherwise, quote unquote accurate. Now here PFF has a particular definition of a drop, which actually tends to be a fairly stringent definition. But one element of a drop, of course, is that it hits a receiver's hands. And if a receiver finds a way to go out of their way to extend their catch radius or something, to corral the ball in, that's a pretty high difficulty catch on a, maybe an inaccurate throw. And that's regarded as a drop where a less good receiver wouldn't be able to get there in the first place. So, there's always a little bit of conversation when it comes to these statistics, but I think it is pretty reasonable to argue that despite having Justin Jefferson for the first several weeks of the season, the drop rate has been criminally bad for Cousins, which of course has hurt his statistics in a pretty meaningful way. If 1 in every 11 of your passes is hitting the ground, boy, right? Not every quarterback is going to deal with drops. So it's not as if you can just add 9.5% to his completion rate and get this is what it would have been under normal circumstances. but his drop rate is like twice that of a lot of other quarterbacks. So it is like fairly nuts. So, and we saw that in the game. And the thing is, here's a good example of how stringent that definition is. So in the game, Alexander Mattison was credited by PFF. Other organizations may have it different. Was credited by PFF as having 2 drops, right? That's Alexander Mattison. TJ Hawkinson, 1 drop, and KJ Osborne, 1 drop. That means the Jordan Addison play was not cataloged as a drop by PFF, which means it's not cataloged as an accurate throw by Kirk Cousins, because the way that they regard accurate throws is completions plus drops. That's basically their definition. Now they've got when their QB manual comes out at the end of every year, and it's a really great resource. It's really worth digging into. They will have a more precise definition of accuracy that will have, perfectly placed passes, well-placed passes, all right placement for passes, poorly placed, and so on. That'll give you a level of granularity that the word drops does not. And maybe a throw like that to Addison would count as a all right placed throw that would count as accurate for the purposes of that kind of project, but not for, the way that they count drops. So that's something to keep in mind. And any catch that is contested cannot be a drop. That's just a contested catch lost or a contested target lost. In this game against the Bears, the Vikings won none of their contested catches. I believe Cousins threw 4 contested targets. The average contested catch rate is, as you would expect, 50%, which honestly, that's kind of impressive from PFF, because you have to come up with a standard and a definition for contested catches before you know what the result will be. So they might, because, when announcers say 50-50 balls, very often that's like a 70-30 ball. Like receivers will win those more often than not. But in terms of how often receivers win contested catches, now mind you, most of those fall incomplete. They're not interceptions. The way that PFF has designed it, pretty good, 50%. So, so that's 4 drops plus 4 contested catch losses, which means that, probably half of those shouldn't have been dropped and half of those shouldn't have been lost contested. So there are about 4 completions there that really could have taken the game from the weird 6-point win that they had to probably a 2-score game, right? Cousins played himself well enough, along with the defense that played outstanding, for that team to have won by multiple scores. And that didn't happen, right? Because of how poorly the receivers played. They got into position, right? Which is mostly the battle at the NFL level, right? It's pretty difficult to be open. That's what usually separates receivers. But yeah, they got that part down, and they didn't get the catching part down, which turns out that's important.
There were a number of catches, almost catches rather, that were just incredibly infuriating. And I'm not just talking about the attempts by our tight end over by Hawkinson, who he was trying at least, but he had a case of the drops. Then Osborne was having it. Addison came close. It's remarkably frustrating. It's not as frustrating as the fumbling situation, but it's frustrating.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of great receivers have a good chunk of drops, right? I mean, there are some receivers that just don't have any drops. I think Larry Fitzgerald went on a 10-year streak without a drop. Jason Avant had an insane streak without a drop. That happens, right? But, for the most part, great receivers will have a number of drops. So the question is, what is the tolerance level for drop rate? For a player near-ish the high end of the tight end market, which we should not keep saying that TJ Hawkinson reset the trade market. That's just buying the Vikings propaganda that was leaked to reporters, because that's not what happened. Yeah, he got paid more, but he was also the tight end that signed a deal in 2023. If you compare him to tight end deals across, the last 10 years and adjust it for the cap space available at time of signing, or adjust it for the cash flow that tight ends will expect over the next 3 years, he ranks about 5th, right? Which is a lot of money, and he's not meeting that expectation. But we shouldn't say that he's being paid more than every tight end in a manner that suggests that that is the expectation for his level of play. We should only say that as a matter of, like, that is a fact, but that's a fact that includes inflation, right? That's like saying that, like, you know, we pay more for gas now than we did 10 years ago. Like, yeah, but that doesn't really like mean anything until we put in some other context, right? So that is, you know, an element of what the expectation for Hawkinson should be. And as part of the conversation that I've had with a couple of people about, you know, tweeting about this, you know, even the top tight ends in the market, you know, people like Travis Kelce, people like George Kittle, right? Even those top tight ends, Mark Andrews, they all have drops. And so when I say, so I tweeted out, like, individually, Hawkinson's drops this year have generally been fairly excusable because they're all really difficult. Like, he's lost a lot of difficult battles at the catch point, either with another receiver or with another defensive back, or with himself, right? But he's had to extend and take himself out of his frame and reel in some fairly difficult acrobatic catches, and he hasn't reeled them in. So individually, a lot of these are really excusable, but the totality, the sum total of it, right? It's not, right? And that's not to say that, you know, the Vikings overpaid him or anything like that. We're like 6 games into this contract. Like, things can turn around, and these are ludicrously small samples that we're working with anyway, right? But it is that he's not currently meeting the expectations of the contract, because the expectations are such that he should reel in a good chunk of those, maybe half, right? The fact that he can get into those positions, right, is a credit to him. It's one of the reasons he's a good tight end. It's one reason that, you know, before the season, a bunch of Vikings fans were like, he's a top 5 tight end in the NFL. Like, name 5 better, right? And a bunch of Vikings fans did that. And, you know, fair enough, right? Because once you get to that 5th level, you're arguing, you're cutting fine distinctions, right? So, okay, fine. When that happens, there's a new set of expectations for you to meet. And now you have to pay back the faith that the Vikings put in you in trading away a draft pick and signing you to a long-term deal. Now the expectations are different. Okay, great. He's better than the average tight end because he can even get into situations where we're having a conversation about those drops, right? Most tight ends can't even get to the point where those kinds of drops matter because they can't get their hands on that ball. Fine, cool. Now you're being paid to get there, right? Now that's baked into the expectation. We are designing plays around your capability to get there, which means there's an opportunity cost. We wouldn't design this play if Irv Smith was still the tight end. We just wouldn't call that, much less throw it. Certainly wouldn't throw it, right? But you're there, which means Cousins is declining a pass to a wide open Jordan Addison 4 or 5 yards shorter to the line of scrimmage, right? But it's on second down. That's a viable throw. He's open, right? Cousins is throwing that down because you're TJ Hawkinson, right? And now that that is established, now that we know there's an opportunity cost to what you're doing, you got to catch those at least a good chunk of the time. That was 2nd and 19. That would have been dope, right? That would have been really big. I don't think they ended up converting that drive, right? So, like, I think they ended up punting on that series because they didn't get to 3rd and 19. They didn't convert that, if I remember correctly. So, okay, they could have gotten 3rd and manageable and maybe converted that if Cousins knew you weren't going to hit that. So now it's no longer a credit to your ability to get there. Now it's an expectation that is baked in with its own costs. And so you need to repay that faith. So that's the issue, right? KJ Osborne has been having a very frustrating year. He is also doing the thing where he is getting open in a way that we're not seeing a lot of third receivers do. His ability to get open and get the ball to him is really good. Got to catch him. Same deal, same conversation. So I think based off of the history of KJ Osborne's play, off the history of TJ Hawkinson's play, off of what we saw out of Jordan Addison the first couple of games and over the course of his college career, I think this will correct itself. And I don't mean magically. Maybe they'll work on their hands in practices more than usual. Maybe that'll help correct things. But I think that this will correct itself and we'll see an increased output at offensive performance. In the meantime, pretty good news that the defense is playing pretty well.
So it's worth mentioning that this is the first of at least 4 games that Justin Jefferson is not going to be suiting up for. Yeah. This is the offense that came out against a world-class, terrible defense for the Bears, and they didn't break 200 yards passing. This was ugly.
And Cousins played well, right? And so that's what happens, right? Like, Cousins plays well. You don't have Justin Jefferson. You adjust your offense for a lack of Jefferson, but it is tough, right? And you don't break 200 yards. It's like 187 or something like that. I don't remember, but you don't break 200. You certainly pass enough that you should be able to break 200. And you're not running to make up for it. Like, there are games where, like, if Jalen Hurts passes for 190 yards, there's a pretty good chance that they won the game, right? Maybe not this week, but a pretty good chance that they won the game because they rushed for 250. Now, we've seen that, right? That didn't happen here. Vikings didn't rush for 250. They couldn't run block. Alexander Mattison couldn't break tackles. He was the only one that, like, ran the ball more than once, right? Like, Cam Akers had one. One of the receivers, Brandon Powell, maybe had one. Kirk Cousins, I guess he technically had a couple. I'm not counting them because, like, their scrambles are not designed runs. So that's not really run blocking, right? Okay, so Cam Akers is, like, not good enough to give the ball on a carry. Certainly he's good enough to randomly lateral the ball, which, you know, clearly Cousins wasn't perfect in the game. Okay, Madison, it's your job. Do it? Like, what's happening? So that was pretty bad. Obviously, the switch from Ezra Cleveland to Dalton Reisner after Cleveland got hurt, you know, that probably impacted things, including the play calling. But Dalton Reisner played pretty well, right? I thought he played better than Ezra Cleveland typically plays, which is a conversation to eventually have. Ezra Cleveland doing all right in the run game most weeks, not this week, most weeks, complicates that conversation, but, you know, whatever. But yeah, so you're not producing offensive output running the ball, so you're relying on throwing the ball. The quarterback is getting the ball out reasonably-ish on time, not his strong suit, but fine. Accurately, with enough timing and arm strength to get it to you and just you. And it's not happening, right? Yeah, it's Kirk Cousins. He's going to make a mistake. Like, he's going to lateral the ball away 5 feet behind the running back. But and you know, the Vikings, for whatever reason, did not get punished for that mistake, which is crazy. But okay, fine.
Amazing.
Sure, why not?
Amazing that was the fumble luck we actually got this year.
Yeah, it's stunning, right? Like, God has frowned on the Bears so much that he got distracted enough not to punish the Vikings. That's just incredible. Which, man, makes you really wonder what Alan Williams did, right? God was like, oh, okay. All right.
And now we're going back to the joke at the end of last episode's interview. Yeah.
Which I'm so happy some of you did not get. That's so precious. That's so good. Keep that energy. Keep the world as bright-eyed as it seems to be. Somehow you're a Vikings fan. So keep that energy. But yeah, without Justin Jefferson, they called deeper shots for Hawkinson. They had Osborne running a little bit deeper. They had Addison play a lot more. Those are all what we expected. And the Vikings receivers just didn't pay that effort back. So the offense looks stilted. I don't think that this is what the offense generally will look like. This was such an unusual day for drops, even in a year where we've had a lot of drops, where I don't think that that's going to be the norm. But I'm worried about next week. So great.
Yeah, that San Francisco defense is going to be something. Upset going into Minnesota. I've got thoughts. Well, I want to talk just a little bit more about the offense before we talk about what the defense did to Chicago. Because I feel like it's a much more interesting story. Because the defense, we were expecting the defense to go in and actually like work. Meanwhile, the Vikings, again, couldn't get the run game really going against a very bad run defense for Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, there's not like much to add to what was already said. I mean, we could take a look at, for example, we've got some of the rushing metrics here. The rush yards after contact, the Vikings averaged 1.5, which is also what Alexander Madison averaged. So when taking on contact, didn't do much, forced 3 missed tackles, which also tells us he didn't actually get that many yards before contact. Some of that is on the running back, right? Some of that is a question of vision, elusiveness, etc. Running backs control when they get contacted, right? But some of that is just the blocking, right? The run blocking just wasn't there. I'd be interested in what the week's run block win rate was. That's not how the ESPN metrics work. They give us an update for the season for that week, which is fairly annoying, but it's more data than we had before. So,
but Arif, I've been told multiple weeks this year that the Vikings have an elite run blocking offensive line and an elite pass blocking offensive line as well.
Well, technically, still kind of true. For whatever reason, in week 6, all of their ranks in those categories went down by like 1 or 2, but they went down. So, certainly this was not an occasion where they availed themselves well, as it were. But yeah, I mean, the run blocking was poor, the running was poor, so the run production was bad. As it's just simple math.
Just tired of this. Well, let's talk about the defense. It's important to note that unlike most games where the Vikings knocked out the starting quarterback for Chicago, they did win. I can say that because it's happened so many times.
Yeah.
I started to do like a deep dive over the last 20 years trying to get a stat, and I stopped caring after a while. When I got to the Rex Grossman years, I'm good.
Well, so if you did a mental, so I'm trying to figure out when they played the Chicago version of Andy and the Chicago version of Nick Foles, were they in-game substitutions or did they start?
They were in-game substitutions.
Oh my God! So Chase Daniel and Andy Dalton and Nick Foles. Oh my God!
Yeah, this has happened so many times. It is
Has someone told the Chicago Bears?
Look.
This is an employment concern. This is a labor concern.
This is... You always got to bring labor and class into things. Right? I don't understand why this
Look,
is.
if you play for Chicago, playing the Vikings is a work hazard.
Yeah, especially if you're quarterback. Yeah, like there were times where Cutler was not knocked out of the game, but like this has happened a lot to Chicago quarterbacks.
You can't lie to me. There's not a single time Cutler has not been knocked out of the game.
Okay. Well, point is that this has happened a lot. I'd even posited during the game, I was like, how often is this because it seems like it happens enough where everyone's bracing for, and this is why we brace for the backup quarterback. This is absolutely one of the reasons.
In my piece on the white left, I listed all the backup quarterbacks, I think only since 2019 that the Vikings had lost to, right? And the point is not that oh my God, they're bad against backup quarterbacks. The Vikings are, in fact, pretty good against backup quarterbacks, but they're not as good as they should be. And that's the part everyone remembers. Everyone remembers the Chase Daniel game where he threw 3 yards down the field every single play and demolished the Zimmer defense, right? Everyone remembers the Cooper Rush game. Okay, they almost lost to third string Teddy Bridgewater, right? That's okay. So, there's a lot of that in there, but they did Matt Moore, Chiefs, right? There's a lot of those losses in there, but they have won many more games against backups than they've lost. But it's the specter of the losses that hang over your head because your win rate against in-game backup quarterback substitutes who play a lot of the game should be very high, right? It should be 80+% if you think you're a playoff team. And the Vikings have acted like they're a playoff team in every one of the years that we've been talking about, right? Go all the way back to 2015, the Vikings have acted like they're a playoff team. So they have to win 80% of those games, right? So, and they haven't, and so that sticks out in your head. Now, they did take down Andy Dalton when he started for the Saints. Guess that doesn't count, right? They did beat the backup Nick Foles, right? They did beat the backup Andy Dalton for the Chicago Bears, right? So, they're there. But man, it's easy to remember the Chase Daniel one. It's so easy.
This was an interesting game, and I enjoy that, like, right away the Vikings were able to take the ball away from them. But so Justin Fields goes out, starts running around, starts making a couple of plays, starts running running around a little bit, and the defense once again cannot stop a runner. Like, it seemed like the defense was having a rough time stopping runners. Now, the defense, however, was getting deep penetration against Fields. Like, this was a great day for sacks for Minnesota.
And they had 5 sacks, some innumerable number of quarterback hits. I mean, innumerable. Let me look it up. I've got the numbers in front of me. So the Vikings got 21 individual pressures, and they also pressured Justin Fields 33% of the time. They pressured not Chase Daniel. They pressured Tyson Bagent even more than that. It was let's get the numbers in front of us. It was Tyson Bagent 33% of the time, Justin Fields 65% of the time. And what's amazing is that, the Vikings do this by creating one-on-one matchups. It's kind of the same way that Zimmer would create one-on-one matchups, except Zimmer would appear to blitz, and then he would blitz an average amount. The Vikings would blitz more than any other team since like the 1977 Falcons. Like, they are allergic to coverage, right? They don't know what that means. You got to attack the quarterback because what else are you supposed to do? That's your job. And so, they blitzed Justin Fields 70.6% of the time. That's crazy. They've already had a game where they blitzed somebody 80% of the time, and it was like the second most in NFL history, and it would have been the most at least until 2007. And it would have been the most, except Wink Martindale did like an 88%er against like Lamar Jackson, like that week, right? Which is also insane. But this game, he blitzed Justin Fields 70.6% of the time. Oh my gosh, that's so much. Did you keep that up when the rookie backup quarterback went in? No, they dialed it up. Even more than that. There was one snap where Tyson Bagent wasn't blitzed. The other 14 blitzes. What in the world?
It was remarkable.
That's nuts. An 8, like, what, so a 93.3% blitz rate.
I gotta mention this. DJwanham starts off the game with an amazing move. It almost seemed like he might not have actually been touched, but when he went out for the blindside sack, my only thought was the Jared Allen jackass thing. Like, in another world, Justin Fields would have been planted through the earth. Like, he would have gotten up with the grass still in his helmet to start the game. It was like that blatant. Now rule changes, whatever. He didn't put his body weight on. But like a couple of years ago, that would have been a hospital ball. He would have been done for the game. DJwanham would have eaten his lunch.
It's amazing. So you're right, he didn't get touched. As is tradition, particularly against the Bears, DJwanham was unblocked for the majority of his pressures. So he had 6 pressures in this game, and I don't know like what spell he casts or what martial art he's learned that allows him to conceal his presence, but he had 6 pressures and 2 pass rush wins. That's nuts. How does that happen?
He's playing in the right division since we play the Bears twice. Like,
yeah, and it particularly happens against. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, he had an unblocked safety. How does that ever happen? That's crazy. Like, what in the way? And it's like multiple. It's not just like Justin Fields 8 times, because then it's just like, oh, you figured out how he calls protections and you're explaining. No, like, it happened with a different coaching staff, and it happened with like Mitch Trubisky. I think it happened to Andy Dalton. Like, good. What? Why does DJwanham live in their heads rent free? That makes no sense. He's just a guy. He's barely on the roster. What is happening? But yeah, he led the team in pressures because, of course, he did. Like, I don't know what to say about that. Good for him. So he ends up with a sack and 5 hurries. He ends up with a batted pass, which genuinely, that's like an individual effort. It's like difficult to accidentally get one of those unless the ball hits you in the helmet, and that didn't happen. So definitely credit to him. And he ended up with like 3 stops in the run game, or 2 stops in the run game, which again, genuinely individual effort, right? That's good. So I'm not like knocking it entirely, but I am confused, right? So great, good job. But Josh Metellus, 4, right? That's another demonstration of like the capacity for all these blitzes to open up, right? Obviously, one of them ended up being the forced fumble that Jordan Hicks scooped and scored. But yeah, this was like a really highlight performance from the defense. So they've had 2 really great performances. Once against the Carolina Panthers, once against Chicago Bears, and that forces us to ask the question: what does it mean that they're having these great performances against bad quarterbacks? Right, the Chicago Bears are 0-6. Frank Reich just announced today, as of this recording, that he's no longer going to call plays. It's going to be his offensive coordinator. Like, that's how bad the offense has gotten over there, right? And the other one's the Chicago Bears. We know what's going on there. I mean, we don't. I guess that's the problem. But yeah, like that's these are bad offenses, but the worst offensive output that the Carolina Panthers ever had was against the Vikings. The second worst offensive output that the Bears ever had was against the Vikings. So this is what a good defense looks like against a bad offense, right? So if this were a good defense, that's what we would see. If this were a mediocre defense, we'd see a significantly worse performance. So is there something there? And I wonder how much of this has to do with the capacity for the opposing quarterback to read the blitz. Like, it might just be entirely the Vikings are an extreme pressure test for quarterbacks and their ability to read the blitz, and bad offenses can't do that. Bad quarterbacks and bad offenses can't do that. And so they're going to look worse than average against the Vikings. And maybe above average quarterbacks are going to look a lot better against the Vikings. I don't think the evidence that we have suggests that much. Justin Herbert played worse against the blitz than without the blitz. The Vikings actually, I mean, they didn't like crush Patrick Mahomes or anything like that, but like the Chiefs scored 27 points, which is not the least they've scored this season. They have been weird this season. They have not been the offensive juggernauts, but now they're defensive juggernauts, so it doesn't matter. They're always going to win. But I still think that like not getting crushed by 40, right, which the Bears did, to the Chiefs offense is something for a defense that was supposed to be as bad as the Vikings was entering the season, right? So the past 3 weeks, I think we've gotten above expectation performances from this defense. And I think that means something, right? Now, we're not going to know until, like, because Purdy's pretty good at beating the blitz, so we'll see. So we're not going to know until we get a wider variety of these quarterbacks. But hey, I think that this is like meaningful enough for us to say that there might be something with this year's defense. I think long term, if Flores stays, almost certainly that'll be the case. That's what's happened in both of his previous stops. But I think that in particular here, we're beginning to see the returns maybe a little bit early. Maybe this is a blip. I don't know. But I like what I see.
I don't feel like we've talked enough about how good Denil Hunter has been this year, how dominant, and how he's leading the league in sacks. This guy is having a remarkable year so far.
Yeah, 100%. So like you said, he's leading the league in sacks. And this is like a year where we're seeing like the best edge rushers in the NFL. Like Myles Garrett is having his best year, which it's Myles Garrett. Like he's always been a top 3 edge rusher, sometimes the top 1. Like I had him entering the season as the top edge rusher in the NFL, and he's having a phenomenal year. So the pressure leaders include players like Max Crosby and Aiden Hutchinson and so on, but the sack leaders include Denil Hunter and TJ Watt and Trey Hendrickson. So there's some interesting stuff going on now. Hunter doesn't have the pressure totals that these other ones do, but he also does have a lot of stops in the run game that kind of helps his case. He's leading the league in run stops with 21. Like there's like a lot going on. He's forced a fumble. I think he's got a pass deflection. So like he's playing really well. I wouldn't say he's playing as well as like Myles Garrett. I wouldn't say he's playing as well as Micah Parsons or TJ Watt. But that's like a fun conversation for us to be in, right? For us to be like, hey, is Denil Hunter like, is he up there with Max Crosby? Is he in that top 5 with those other 5 or those other 4? Maybe. And that's cool as hell. Like and so it's nice to see. Now, obviously the Vikings only have the 1-year contract with him. And that could make him interesting trade bait, right? I don't want that. I don't like giving up on seasons. I don't like giving up on players that definitely have a couple of years left, right? Denil Hunter's 28. I would like this to turn into a final contract, right? 5-year, maybe he plays beyond that, but a 5-year contract with the Vikings, and that would rule. It'd be super sweet to see Hunter continue the level of production that made people so excited about him 3 years ago, right? Like 3 years ago, he and Za'Darius Smith, playing for a different team, led the league in pressures, right? He was the first player age-wise to hit 50 sacks, right? The youngest player in NFL history to hit 50 sacks. That's so cool. So I think we're seeing some of that again. Now, the eggheads and the nerds, have pointed out that Denil Hunter is the king of the slow pressure and the king of the slow sack. His sacks occur later in the down. His pressures occur later in the down. And there's something to that. That's one reason that Myles Garrett is just having a better year. But I do think that it is not just pure effort play, right? Like Max Crosby is a high talent and also high motor player, right? Denil Hunter's a high talent and a high motor player. I would not argue Aiden Hutchinson is a low talent player or anything like that. He's a very high talent player, but he primarily gets these high numbers, I think, more through motor than through skill and talent at the moment, right? TJ Watt is much, much more skilled and talented than Aiden Hutchinson, but I would say that the disparity is on the effort side more, whereas Myles Garrett's disparity is on the athleticism and skill side more. Both of them are immensely skilled. Both of them have a lot of motor, but that's kind of where I'd put them. Whereas that's not really the case for Denil Hunter, despite the fact that he's a slow pressure guy. I think a lot of it just has to do with the way that offensive blocking design works and the way that the defensive blitz design works. Now, this has always been an issue, so it's not as if it's just, hey, now that Flores is here, whatever, right? It's been kind of a thing for a while, but it hasn't gone away. Other slow pressure guys lose their pressures, right? It's like another threshold of sustainability to get over. Hunter doesn't. This keeps happening. So I think there's something there, even as it persists across defensive types, right? Like the Vikings are forcing really quick times to throw because of the blitzes, and he's still getting his pressures and he's still getting his sacks. So there's something there. I don't think that he's going to be the best player in the NFL at the edge rusher position, but I think there's something there that's really cool, and it's nice to see.
It's been fun to watch. Of all the things on the team that has been a joy this year, it's been Denil Hunter. Like Denil Hunter's been consistent. Denil Hunter's been good. His play has not angered me in some way.
Right, and he's like chasing down like these insanely fast quarterbacks, right? Justin Fields gets to the outside of him, has an open lane, and Hunter chases him just like a 3-yard gain. When's the last time a running quarterback for against the Vikings gets outside your edge rusher, your elite edge rusher, and you've been like, he's got it? Never. That's never happened. Right? You've been like, Everson, this is your one weakness. Crap. That's a 20-yard run. Bye, Michael Vick. He's chasing these dudes down. He has the lowest missed tackle rate of anybody with his snap count. It's like 4%. He's one missed tackle this year. Oh my God. So yeah, on the level of guys that do not frustrate you, he's at the top. This is great stuff. Even Harrison Smith, you're just like, bud, you could do better than that. Even Harrison Smith, but Denil, he's got it.
It's been fun to watch. And before we get into the before we get into the mailbag, I would just like to bring up the interceptions that happened this game, especially Jordan Hicks. But Byron Murphy's was also fantastic. Byron Murphy just kept going.
Yeah, well, until he fumbled, but it didn't matter because he recovered it. Man, something about the Bears made God mad. Don't know what it was. Maybe we'll find out in the news. But I mean, Byron Murphy played pretty well. He didn't even lead the team in yards given up. And if a quarterback leads the team in yards given up, he might have had a great game, right? Like it doesn't That's not like that's who they throw at. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? But he didn't even hit that threshold, right? So he played pretty well. Now, mind you, the interception was a gift wrap, right? It was like Tyson Bagent was playing out of his mind, and everyone like because that was the moment, right? That was the moment where you were like, maybe this backup quarterback thing is not gonna happen because he was dealing that drive. He was like going. You're like, God, just hit him. What are you doing? Just hit him. Just pick off a pass. I don't know, man. This sucks. And then they would hit him, and nothing would happen. Then you got the pick, and then Tyson Bagent crumbles for like the rest of the game. That was glorious. I don't believe in momentum, but that was awesome.
That was quite nice, quite glorious. Well, let's head over to the mailbag. We got more about the game. This is actually a fairly football-centric mailbag until the very end, where we deal with
all of you.
I enjoy the end of the mailbag this episode, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's go to the mailbag, and the first question is Raul, who asks, now that we're a defensive team again, which one of our playmakers is most likely to make the Hall of Fame? Denil Hunter, Harrison Smith, Ed Ingram, or Creed?
So, okay, first of all, I choose to believe that only the offensive players listen to Creed. And I think that explains a lot, right? Because Garrett Bradbury picked it. It's Kirk Cousins' favorite music. We've, for some reason, gone over this. We've covered this.
See, the defense listens to something harder like Switchfoot. Yeah, I get
it. We were meant to live for so much more as he's just like barreling through tackles on the interception return. That's right, Byron Murphy. You were. Get your name in the sky.
Let's go to Stizo, who asks, what does Wes Phillips do? Could a change at OC help improve the offense?
To avoid like the Office Space jokes, he actually does quite a bit generally. So this always gets asked of any offensive coordinator that doesn't call the plays. Like there was like this whole mystery. I remember with like, what does Chip Kelly's offensive coordinator do in Philadelphia? And they like wrote articles, like multiple articles about it. What does John DeFilippo do with Doug Peterson calling the plays in Philadelphia? I remember having to read them because I was like, that'd be good to know. He's going to call the plays in Minnesota. What's up? But they're pretty heavily involved in the week to week, right? So first of all, it's not as if he doesn't do anything on game day, right? Like certainly a big part of what his job is going to be is cataloging defensive tendencies as it happens, keeping track of what the offense is doing, how effective it is at certain things, and being part of that headset conversation, right? So it might be the case that Kevin O'Connell is calling plays, but between plays, right, Wes Phillips is in his ear saying, hey, we're doing a pretty good job in this personnel, or hey, we're doing a pretty good job attacking this particular player, right? We're finding ways to exploit this particular matchup. Hey, there's going to be a deep shot here because when we do this, they rotate here. If you can get Cousins to audible here, or if you can get this play in and we just motion to force this rotation, we'll have a deep shot available, right? That's endlessly valuable, right? So yeah, Kevin O'Connell might be calling the plays, but you've got somebody on game day there. Well, that happens throughout the week in various ways, right? So he's watching the opposing defense's film, right? He is conversant in the playbook, and he knows kind of like what tweaks or adjustments need to be made to account for the fact that, hey, when we run this play, it depends on the safety having this kind of range. Well, this week, this safety is just so much faster. So we can't run this play, or we have to run this play at different landmarks. The receivers have to line up somewhere else if we want to run this play. And if that happens, we have to change the rest of that offense, because if our receivers line up somewhere else for just one play, now we can only run that play once in the game, or we're giving a tell, right? We're signaling that this is definitely going to be a pass because we've never done this before. So now all the receivers for all of the plays might have to adjust in some way, or maybe we have to motion into it, or maybe we could turn this into a motion play. It's just going to be part of the offensive game planning throughout the week. He's going to be part of having a direct feedback with all the position coaches, having a direct line of conversation with Kirk Cousins throughout the week. It's not just Kirk Cousins and the quarterback coach. It's not just Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell. It's Kirk Cousins and the quarterback coach, Sean O'Hara, I think, and Wes Phillips and Kevin O'Connell. And Wes Phillips is playing a big part in that conversation. He also kind of sets the agenda for the rest of the position coaches, right, on the things that they're going to be doing throughout that week. So it's more than being a glorified assistant, right? Kevin O'Connell has a ton of things that he needs to focus on throughout the week. That's why, 10 years ago, we had very, very few head coach play callers. Now that they're absorbing that responsibility, that is an insane amount of work to take on. But that doesn't mean they're doing all of the work in the week ahead of the game in that part of the offensive matchup. And that work that the offensive coordinator is putting in, that the head coach just doesn't have the time to do because he is doing media, or he is in a defensive team meeting, or he's in a special teams meeting, or he's talking to the front office about a player that they just acquired or are about to acquire, or this or that or this or that. While that's happening, the offensive coordinator is breaking down film, right? Or designing plays, or updating the terminology with the quarterback, right? While that's happening, he's building up the kind of knowledge that he's going to need that on game day allows him to have that conversation I was just talking about that occurs on game day. So, yeah, the offensive coordinator does a lot, maybe a little bit less than, in other teams, but certainly that doesn't mean that he's not a big part of the way that the Vikings offense operates.
Next question is going to be from Hunter, who asks, are the Vikings the worst up by one score team ever? I don't know if the offense has scored to go up by 2 possessions at least once this season.
So I looked at the win rate of teams that have been ever in the lead, right? Which definitionally includes being up by 1 score, right? So the Vikings obviously have a 33% win rate when they're up by 1 score, because they've always been up by 1 score in all of these games, right? So that's not great. In fact, it's one of the lowest. So I sorted these teams by total number of losses after having gone up at any point in the game. Now, there are, 6? Yeah, 6 teams that have never lost once they've gone up by at least 1 score. Miami, Dallas, Tampa Bay, the New York Jets, Pittsburgh, and New England, who did go up by 1 score once, and it was their win. So, congrats. But in terms of teams that have lost the most, well, the Carolina Panthers, right? So they've had 1 game where they weren't ever up by anything. They lost that game, obviously. But their 5 other games, they were up by at least 1 score. So that is a worse team than the Vikings. And then the Vikings are second in wins, tied with Arizona, but are second in losses, tied with Arizona, after having gone up by 1 score, but they do have 1 more win than Arizona after having gone up by 1 score. So the Vikings are 2-4, Arizona is 1-4. If we do it by percentage of wins after being up by 1 score, the Vikings rank 4th in the NFL. So tied for second in total losses, tied for 4th worst in win percentage. So, the Vikings are not the worst up by 1 score team ever. They're just the most disappointing because no one expected Carolina, Arizona, or Denver to win them.
I'm trying to think. So I was when I saw the question, I was trying to think of like teams that would be worse this year that wouldn't necessarily appear on your list. But man, that is a murderer's row of teams that just give up. It's
Chicago's on the list too. By the way, they're tied with the Vikings at 33%.
Ugh, gross. Fred Monticello asks, number 1, how was Andrew Booth Jr.? And number 2, I've noticed that neither Ivan Pace or Brian Asamoah reached even 20 snaps on defense in a game where you'd generally expect a lot of quarterback spy. Why did they do that, and what did they do instead, and was it effective?
So this reminds me of when the Chargers played the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson in the playoffs a number of years ago. Now, this was not necessarily a specific strategy that the Chargers thought of employing. They were very injured. So I don't want to go out of my way to say, hey, this is like they discovered something. And next year, a bunch of teams did try to replicate it, and it didn't quite work out. So I'm not saying this is like 100%, but it's something to kind of consider, is that they put 7 defensive backs on the field against the running quarterback, right? Because they figured that even though they were worried about the run game, even though they knew that the Baltimore Ravens had a pretty big offensive line, right? Even though all of that was true, they were more concerned about Lamar Jackson's speed than anything else. And so they needed to get speed on the field. And so that meant sacrificing even fast linebackers for faster defensive backs. And I wonder if that's kind of part of what happened with the Vikings. So I took a look at the snap counts for all of the Vikings in the game. And the interesting thing is that it didn't actually play out like that. I thought that the Vikings would have a number of snaps where they had 6 defensive backs on the field. So the 3 safeties that they're always playing, and Josh Metellus is getting more and more playing time. He started this game, right? Metellus played nearly every snap. And so you've got Smith, Bynum, and Metellus. And then you've had the 2 outside corners, which were Caleb Evans and Byron Murphy. And then when Caleb Evans got hurt, it was Andrew Booth. And we'll answer that question in a second. But very rarely did they add another defensive back in. So Theo Jackson played a couple of snaps. We know that we know that Mekhi Blackman played a snap. On average, the Vikings played 5.1 defensive backs on an individual snap. So that doesn't suggest they put more defensive backs on the field. They just put fewer linebackers on the field, which means they put more defensive linemen on the field, right? And we're including edge rushers as part of that. So they made sure that they clogged the gaps with run stuffers. People like Harrison Phillips. Jonathan Bullard has been a better run defender this year than I think he's ever been, right? So Jonathan Bullard is out there. Khyiris Tonga, I think, got his most snaps this year, right? He had like 30 plus snaps. I think that is a big part of the way the Vikings approached this game because they knew the Bears wanted to run the ball, even though they didn't have a running back. They knew that Justin Fields did like to scramble up the middle, did like to take advantage of the gaps that open. And then they also do like QB power, QB draw type stuff. So having guys like Khyiris Tonga, having guys like Jonathan Bullard and Harrison Phillips up front, Dean Lowry, right? Having those guys up there was a better way to stop Justin Fields than having a linebacker out there when neither Asamoah nor Ivan Pace seem to do a great job securing tackles. Like they get to the ball carrier a lot, right? And that is its own value, even if you miss a tackle because you're slowing the guy down. But with Justin Fields, you might need people who are either more secure in tackling or people that'll prevent him from running in the first place. And so clogging up the gaps might be a better way to do it. So instead of getting a quarterback spy, it's preventing the quarterback from necessitating a spy in the first place. And so putting more defensive linemen on the field. They average 4.62 defensive linemen on the field, which is very high, right? So yeah, we did see a number of snaps from Asamoah. We did see a number of snaps from Pace. But mostly we saw snaps from people like Khyiris Tonga, Jonathan Bullard, and Dean Lowry. Like that's where those snaps went. And then obviously Marcus Davenport before he got hurt.
So the question then is Andrew Booth Jr.
Right. So Andrew Booth Jr., I thought he played all right. He had some good moments, right? So that was nice to see. But he ended up playing like a good chunk of the game. I want to see how many. It was like 26 snaps, right? And mostly he played pretty well in coverage. Didn't get beat too often. When he did get beat, it didn't actually matter too much because the passes weren't all that accurate. So that was nice to see. But it wasn't enough that it was like he was hiding behind, right? Like how bad the quarterback was. And so secretly his coverage numbers were very good. That didn't happen. He actually played all right, which is like nice to see, right? Because he's been buried on the depth chart. He's been behind Mekhi Blackman. He's been behind, Caleb Evans, a 4th round pick from the same draft class, right? They signed a free agent because they couldn't trust him. So, good to see that he actually played pretty well. He was only targeted twice, only allowed 1 reception. It was to Tyler Scott of 7 yards. But yeah, I liked what I saw. He got a pass breakup on DJ Moore. Not everybody gets to do that. So, props to him. But yeah, better than I would have expected. I don't think Chicago has a good offense. So we'll see if that kind of continues, but that's a good sign.
Is that part of your not denouncing, just saying things that you don't like that everyone else also doesn't like? Chicago, not a good offense.
I'd like to say, before anyone gets mad at me, I do not approve of the Chicago Bears. So I want to get that out of the way so that people don't get mad at me later.
I don't care. I don't care who gets mad at me on this podcast that people sometimes pay to listen to. I do not believe that Chicago is good this year. Ziggy Dilf asks a very important question. After everyone saw how the offense looks without him, how much more should Justin Jefferson be asking for his next contract?
Man, he is building up leverage, isn't he? I mentioned in my piece that the Vikings have designed their offense around Justin Jefferson, which is good. You should do that. and in ways that make him difficult to replace, which again, that's good. You should do that because if you're designing an offense around him and somebody who is significantly less good than him can slot in and do the same thing, that means you are not taking advantage of all the things that make him special and unique and good, right? If he can be replaced in your offense, then your offense is not doing a very good job of utilizing him, right? So that's fine, but it does create this problem, right? Where when he's gone, what do you do? The Vikings' answer is flounder, I guess. So the benefit for Jefferson here is that he gets to point to something that generates additional leverage, although I'm confident he would rather just play. His agent now gets to kind of reap the rewards of this sort of thing. So not only is he going to be the highest paid receiver in the NFL, he's gonna get quarterback money, but not like Tyson Bagent money. No, not like Chase Daniel money, but like quarterback money.
I thought you were going to say Brock Purdy money, since people seem to only want to talk about how much money Brock Purdy is making this season.
He's such a good laborer. You're right. I'm not supposed to talk about that.
Nope, you are not. Basecamp K9 asks, for a Reef's short king corner, was there any explanation given for the intentional grounding call on the pass that went over Captain Ham's head?
First of all, I don't understand why I would have a particular expertise for this kind of corner. I think you need to direct these questions to James. But, sometimes, I do the parenting corner. I don't have a kid. So I understand sometimes you go outside of somebody's expertise for some of these corners for the bit. So I get it. So I looked at Football Zebras. So Football Zebras is essentially the premier. It's the officiating blog, which I like a lot. It does a really great job breaking down the minutia of NFL rules and the specifics of how officiating works in the NFL. Like, it's very clear that they're run either in part or entirely by former NFL officials or people who've been trained in the NFL officiating process. And they do a really great job of kind of predicting the impact of new rules, which is not always something that you see done pretty well, even for people who's like my industry focuses more on how gameplay revolves around rules. And that's exactly the kind of thing we're supposed to be good at. We're not that great at it. So Football Zebras is really great because they're a bunch of officiating experts. Well, I was able to see kind of their post on this intentional grounding thing. And essentially, we get some good information about how intentional grounding happens, right? They consult the referee whose sole job it is to look at the quarterback to see if, hey, was he inside or outside the tackle box? Was he under pressure? Did he complete a passing motion? Okay, great. They consult another referee to see kind of, where the ball, all that. So there's like a good conversation here. But at the end, he was just like, okay, so all of these factors suggest that it is intentional grounding. However, which is just great. However, let's see where it is. The threat of a sack referee. What was missed was the ball went over the head of it was like two paragraphs of conversation about what intentional grounding is. But what was missed, maybe a minor detail, was the ball went over the head of fullback CJ Ham, number 30. Quarterbacks are allowed to overthrow a player and even send the ball 15 rows up into the stands if it goes over the head of the receiver who is in the zone of the pass. So even though Ham was not going to catch this pass, Cousins is allowed to overthrow him to avoid a negative yard catch and is reasonably in the path of the pass. This clearly should not have been ruled grounding. Okay, great. That tells us that. Was there an official explanation? As far as I could tell, there was no pool report that talked to the referees after the game. They gave us a ruling here. The thing that really kind of surprises me about this ruling is that before the referees met, before they had that conversation that I just talked about, where one referee is like, yeah, it was a throwing motion, and yeah, he was inside the box, and yeah, he was under pressure, right? Which the under pressure part is like, that is an important part of the ruling. When that was happening, Cousins was pointing to CJ Ham, right? Like he walks up to the ref and he's like, I was throwing to him, CJ Ham. He's an eligible receiver, number 30. And then the broadcast was like, yeah, I mean, Ham is not a small dude, but he's also not Patrick Ricard. He is not 310 pounds at fullback. He is a fullback. That's the job of a fullback. What do you want him to do? Right? It was just like, I don't know. And I can't actually, because even if you squint and the 3 is not a 3, it's probably an 8, and that's an eligible number too. So if you misread the 3 on the 3-0, that shouldn't have mattered. It's the 60s and 70s that you can't throw to, and 50s, I guess, that you can't throw to. You could throw to any other number. And I don't think his jersey looks like a 50, 60, or 70. So, yeah, I don't know. That was just a bad officiating error.
Yeah.
Like, really bad.
Way to marginalize a captain on the team.
Yeah, good job, refs.
Yeah. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous.
I'll see you in the Hague.
I'm not going that far, but I mean, you are a short king in this case, so sure.
No. We were doing the thing where I'm
8 feet tall. Yeah, sorry.
That's not a thing. That's a truth, James.
Oh, my bad.
Keep up. We're doing the thing where I've got the corner of the thing I'm not an expert in. That's the joke.
Yeah. Well,
right.
I read something today about that somebody had. Here's the mind of me. So I'm subscribed to the tall subreddit. I wish I was making this up. And somebody had. This is more embarrassing now that I'm saying that out loud as opposed to when I did it years ago. And so
years ago, you say.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I'm subscribed to the subreddit, and somebody said that they would run into it's a support group. Somebody would run into a 7'4" person like in the wild, and they had taken a picture of them. And the comment was, "May your back stay true." Like, may your back may your back not collapse under your sheer size. And I went, boy, that's about as true. I had to go to the chiropractor this morning. Yeah, I could. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I get it. That's I appreciate that. Jack Rackham asks, it seems as though the Vikings run very few quick hitting slants or any other short routes that aren't screens or flats behind the line of scrimmage. Is that accurate? And if so, why is that the case? Wouldn't that help get drives going and help to avoid quarterback hits and 3rd and long scenarios?
So you're right that they run very few passes behind the line of scrimmage. They're 22nd of 34 quarterbacks in rate of passes behind the line of scrimmage. But actually, short passes, which PFF ranks 0 to 10 yards, they rank 7th of 34. The problem is that those short passes occur later in the read. So the Vikings offense seems to be designed to always have an intermediate or deep shot or both, and then a short option that is just late in the read. It is designed to create explosives. This has been explained actually by O'Connell when he was talking about getting Cousins to stay on the deep read a little bit longer than he normally would, right? That's just before the Vikings even played a game that was discussed. So that's just part of the way that the offense works. It does require your offensive line to play pretty well. As we've discussed, the statistics suggest that actually they do that. But the problem is the Vikings also rank like 5th or something in percentage of throws over 2.5 seconds. Now, they don't rank very high in average time to throw. They're about average in that. And so that to me suggests that the Vikings throw a lot of passes between 2.5 and 3 seconds. Like, not much more. You got a lot of those with Lamar Jackson and CJ Stroud and Justin Fields, but you don't have a ton of those with Kirk Cousins, not a ton of 3+ seconds plays. So they are playing within a particular timing and within a particular progression where a lot of the passes get thrown short after the 2.5 second mark. Cousins loves holding onto the ball. That's been true in a number of offenses he's been in. That's been true in years where he hasn't had a ton of play action. So it's not entirely dependent on the fact that play action tends to extend your time in before throw. It's kind of who he is as a quarterback. So the short option is there. Cousins only goes there when the deep shots aren't there. And the time it takes to check those deep shots, that's when the pressure begins to arrive. So it's not that there aren't a bunch of short passes. It's that there aren't a bunch of plays that emphasize those short passes.
Let's go to the next question, which is from Eric D., who asks, how would you evaluate Jordan Hicks so far this season? Obviously, he made a couple of huge plays yesterday, but I feel like he doesn't have a very good read on how well he's played overall.
Yeah, well, he's played better than he did last year, so which is like great, right? Good job. I would say that, like, so after that game, you could argue that he's done a pretty good job kind of bolstering his overall profile, but he hasn't really disappointed me as much as I had expected over 6 games. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 moments across those games where I've just been like, man, I don't know, man. He's been consistent. He has made a ton of splash plays before today, or yesterday. So, which both of those obviously were great. And he's been on the field way more than any other linebacker, more than Ivan Pace, more than Brian Asamoah, even before today's interesting rotation. So, yeah, I mean, he's largely played well. He just hasn't played, like lights out or anything like that. But when you don't make mistakes, PFF tends to treat you pretty well, like even without the splash plays. So I think he's ranked like 9th or 10th among linebackers. I wouldn't put him there at all, but yeah, it was a good game.
Yeah. Next up is from the Mailman, who asks, it looks like San Francisco might have as much security behind their starters as a Hyundai.
God, Jesus.
If Minnesota can steal a win from them,
my God,
string along another in Green Bay. Note, not Milwaukee. Could they turn into buyers by the Halloween deadline? And which I couldn't help but point that one out again. Which gettable assets would you like to see targeted?
So if the Vikings like end up, in that spot, so Bill Barnwell has like an interesting trade article. Let me pull it up real quick. In this article, the Vikings do trade away Denil Hunter, so it's not as if, we're following the parameters of this article closely, but he identifies basically 8 intriguing trade candidates. We're going to strike Denil Hunter off of it because the Vikings already have him. Don't worry about it. Dalvin Cook, it's probably not going to trade for him, right? It's probably not happening, so fine. Trey Lance, the Vikings already have like 6 safeties. Don't need to worry about that. James Conner. Maybe, I don't think the Vikings want to trade for a running back, but this running back thing is just not working out. So, that's something. But I wouldn't be upset at getting like a Hunter Renfrow, maybe a Jerry Jeudy, maybe a Marquise Brown, but those are the rest of the players that he's identified. Also Zach Ertz, but the Vikings are pretty good at tight end, and this would be weird. So probably you could see a Hunter Renfrow, because unless KJ Osborne turns it around, and I suspect that he will, but the Vikings just don't have a 2 or 3 wide. Obviously, when Justin Jefferson comes back, which by the time that the trade deadline is, he'll be on 2 or 3, like the minimum is 2, but it sounds like he'll be out for a slight bit longer than that. You'll have 2 or 3 weeks without him. It'd be nice to keep the offense on track. And hey, you could trade for him now. You don't got to wait until the deadline to do it. Having someone that you could throw to just to keep the offense open, and having as many options available to you as you attempt this playoff run that is now on the table because you've won 2 in a row, or I guess 3 in a row, including this last one against the Bears. We don't know when Jalen Naylor is going to get healthy. Brandon Powell's like nice to have, but he's not like killing it or anything. But having someone relatively reliable that would protect you against future injuries a little bit, that would give you some like really tight underneath options, especially with Hunter Renfrow. I would be all right with it. But honestly, I don't see a ton of trade opportunities unless somebody thinks of like a cornerback that's on the market, which I can't think of any off the top of my head. I don't see a ton of areas where, let me take a look. I might as well, right? Top 15 trade candidates or whatever. I didn't type the or whatever part.
I was disappointed that you didn't, quite frankly.
Yeah, Google knows what I mean. Okay, so 2023 NFL trade deadlines. Really? All right, PFF. Good on you for winning the SEO game, PFF Brad. All right, so you got Chase Young, Brian Burns. Oh, yeah, Chase Young. Hey, perfect. Marcus Davenport keeps getting hurt. Chase Young technically doesn't solve that problem, as he is a person who has gotten hurt a lot, but he's extremely good, extremely athletic, is clearly just on the outs in Washington. That'd be a fun trade. Brian Burns has been floated a couple of times by Panthers fans. And again, this would occur in a situation where the Vikings have just gone on a winning tear and have kind of corrected that weird average that their the law of averages exacting revenge on them, right? So that's something that you could take a look at. I think both of those look good. The New York Jets have extra edge rushers, so Carl Lawson's on the table. Personally, I prefer Chase Young or Brian Burns, but like, they also cost more, so that's something to kind of keep in mind. The benefit to both of them is that like you aren't sacrificing your future, because the idea is to extend both of them, and they're both fairly young. So, which is not the case with Carl Lawson. So I think that you do have to kind of keep that in mind. Let's see, Cortland Sutton from the Broncos would be kind of interesting as well. Let's see, quarterback, don't want to do that. Denil Hunter, already have him. Josh Uche is okay. Jalen Johnson, Chicago Bears.
We have a Denil Hunter at home.
We have a Denil Hunter at home. It's Denil Hunter, actually. It's Pop-Tart brand Pop-Tarts. Probably don't want Jalen Johnson, and you wouldn't get him because he's in division. And there's no other corners in this list. Maybe Darnay Holmes, New York Giants. I don't know how much he'd help. Jeremy Chin, Carolina Panthers. Hey, oops, all safeties. Why not?
Yeah. Let's go to Jack, who asks, the current NFL heavily favors creativity by its teams. That said, are there any more other creative ways we could turn the ball over? It seems that we've found more ways to fumble than Bubba knows shrimp preparations. So why isn't the NFL rewarding the Vikings' continued extreme creativity?
So I did, this reminds me, I did make a mistake in the previous episode when I talked about 1-point safeties. There are 2-point safeties. The returns on extra point attempts are worth 2 points. So my bad. I confused that with the 1-point safety, which is when a team actually takes a safety instead of a return on a point after attempt. Usually it's the team attempting to block a kick. As they block a kick, the ball ends up in the end zone or something. They take it across the end zone, then go back into the end zone. And they take a safety. So it's 1 point. But technically, the kicking team could also take a safety. For example, someone is on a 2-point return. You knock the ball out of their hands. The ball lands in the end zone. You recover it in your own end zone. That would be potentially a 1-point safety. So, my bad. That said, that is a fumble scenario. That hasn't happened yet for the Vikings, I don't think. And there was even a blocked kick. So, it could have happened. But I like the idea of the Vikings blocking like a critical kick, attempting to return it for a necessary 2 points, and then fumbling it. That to me is very funny. And if it ends in a 1-point safety, that rewards another point to the other team, the very kick they were attempting to block, that would be very funny. So that's a creative way to do it. I think doing it the way that the Patriots did it against the Raiders, right? Yeah, because Chandler Jones swallowed Mac Jones. I remember that now. That's funny, where it's a bunch of laterals, and then for some reason you give it to Mac Jones with Chandler Jones like in his face for some reason. That's funny, an end of game fumble like that. They did already do the lateral one with Cam Akers. And technically, I don't think they've muffed a punt to the other team. I could be wrong about that, James. But they have fumbled a punt return, which is different. But muffing a punt or muffing a kickoff is technically not the same because anybody can return a kickoff. That's why onside kickoffs exist. But that's a good one. There's a lot available here. There's a lot we can work with.
Let's go to our next question, which is from Brian Jellerson, who asks, potentially irresponsible hot take territory, but if the defense and offense continue on their current respective progression/regression trajectories, what is the likelihood of us parting ways with Kevin O'Connell and promoting Flores to head coach?
I don't think high at all. Interesting theory though, right? So like this actually does happen, right? Where teams will fire the head coach in order to maintain or retain the coordinator that they want. I think like Dirk Ketter in Tampa Bay is a good example of that. Obviously that didn't like work out or anything like that, but that does like happen. I don't think that happens here, especially because hey, Brian Flores is doing a lot better as a defensive coordinator, right? Like just keep that going. You don't got to make him a head coach. Let someone else do that. Which I guess would be the scenario, but I don't think the Vikings would fire a KOC at all, right? The only scenario where the Vikings fire a KOC would be in a couple of years, and by that time, Brian Flores will have been hired away if the defense continues to be good enough to promote him. So, sorry, that's not happening.
Yeah, definitely not. Let's go to our next question from Maximilius, who asks, for a Reefs analytics never know who's on the field corner, what are some hypothetical solutions to this problem? Giving every player a barcode that gets scanned when they come on and off the field? Or maybe assigning them a unique or team-specific number?
I wouldn't want to dehumanize players like that by reducing them to a number that you'd put on some kind of uniform. I don't even like the way the uniform sounds. It like ruins their individuality. So I think that you would just have to train a sufficiently advanced image recognition piece of software to recognize all the different players and tag them in order to do that. But we can't do that. We don't have the technology to do that. Sadly, it is 1998, and we just don't have the capacity to do that. So
it's the 90s.
I'm 7.
Wow. Can't wait for that to be done out of context. That'll be fantastic.
Oh, great.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Benjamin Hoy asks, I was watching Bills Giants on Sunday Night Football tonight, and I felt a profound sadness when Tyrod Taylor's last pass fell incomplete and the Giants lost. Because Tyrod Taylor deserved this revenge win against a coach that benched him for Nathan Peterman. Also his punctured lung, etc. Is there another player or team that you feel the laughs of happiness or cries of sorrow with their wins and losses? Vikings and Seahawks obviously don't count. I was having this during...
the Seahawks count?
I was having this thing with the Randy Moss on the Patriots going for that perfect season. Like, I was cheering for him as a Patriot.
Yeah. I was honestly, I was there with you. I was like one of my friends that was sad when the Patriots lost. In 2007, just to be clear. After that, I was done with that team. After the biggest bandwagon season of all time, I was out.
Yeah.
But
I don't care who on this Vikings podcast disagrees with me. I thought Randy Moss was great. We're just going to start doing these now. These are going to appear on our commercial that we air like 1 million times during a Fox Sunday.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Josh Gordon, whenever he reappeared on a team between like 3-year-long suspensions, I'd be like, I hope that guy gets 1,800 yards. That'd be nice. That was one of them. I get it for Tyrod Taylor. The Chargers did stab him, so that's, any win for him is a win for us. But, victims of petty crime. That's what I mean by us, James.
Obviously.
Grand larceny is like very clearly not petty. I should be like a little bit more upset.
Listen, everyone, grand larceny is not petty. See?
I don't care who on this podcast. I don't
care who disagrees.
But yeah, I mean, like the Lions kind of, but they're getting into that territory where they're feeling it, and you don't have pity wins for people who are feeling it, right? The Lions can win a couple playoff games, and then I'm out. Then it's like, all right, well, now you're on your own. Same with the Bills, right? I didn't love that they made the postseason the year they had like a negative point differential. I just kind of don't like it when bad teams make the playoffs. But it was the Bills, so I was like, all right, go you. And now I'm done. The Bills, good job, Bills. When the Browns were on that winning streak and like there was a ton of beer on the line, okay? When they're on that losing streak and like Bud Light was waiting over a year to open these fridges, I was like always all there for them to win a game. And then I was there for them to win a playoff game. So I was about that. You didn't really have to think too hard about whether or not you like Baker because you didn't really care about what he said. In pressers, you just like the commercials were nice and the Browns were winning. So it's like, hey, it's Kevin Stefanski. Hey, he should do pretty well. That's nice. But yeah, I can't the Chargers, I guess. Like the Chargers are a team that like also frustrates me in the same way that they frustrate their fans. In as far as I expect them to make the playoffs basically every year, because I'm just like, well, I mean, on paper, this defense is fantastic. And I know that offense is good. They've got a quarterback that's like borderline Hall of Fame talent, a thing that's been true since like 2006, by the way. and they just don't do it. They don't like win playoff games. So the Chargers are there. I don't know, like a bunch of individual players. I can't think of a ton of individual players where I'm just like, oh man, you deserve one. Teddy, I want Teddy to be on a winning team, but I'd like him to play in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So I doesn't really,
I mean, T-Jack played in the Super Bowl after they, were after the game was so out of hand that they decided to bench their starter and have.
He also did the coin tosses.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
So yeah, that's important.
That T-Jack had T-Jack won a ring and played in a Super Bowl. That's still remarkable to me. Rest in peace, T-Jack.
Rip.
Also, is there a point in Arif's sports writer journey where he transitioned from being a Vikings fan to just a football fan who takes notice of the Vikings, or is Arif still among the Norse followers? Can you describe the gradients between being a dedicated fan and being a national writer split from their original team of choice? We actually covered this in the very first bonus episode over on Patreon. So if you subscribe over to Patreon, which I know this is just a thing to get $3.50 from you, I'm aware. However, I am shameless. So if you go onto Patreon and go like all the way back, the original bonus episode, I believe episode 1 of the bonus episodes, we just put out episode 70. That actually does cover a good listing of how Arif got to where he was at that point, which basically describes what you're asking. So, yeah. I'm taking Arif's answer for that one. Let's go to Luke Bronnan Lee Mulligan. A phenomenal name.
That's good.
Says, for Arif's streaking corner.
God.
We don't spend a lot of time here. What are your thoughts on
good reason.
Linfield University's 67-season-long streak of non-losing seasons?
So I looked this up, and I was like ready to be like, as a contrarian, like annoyed, right? Like, come on, what division do you play? NAIA, time to move up. They play like Division 3, which, that's somewhat competitive. They've got a wicked cool mascot, so got to give them that to them. They care a lot about the streak. They call it The Streak. 2 years ago, they released like a documentary about it where they have like a bunch of interviews with bunch of people from like the 1956 football team that had that original winning season that set off this streak. I looked at their schedule this year. They're undefeated. So it's not as if, I'm sure there are some seasons where they like barely eked by on the streak. And like the last game of the season was like monumental in that capacity. But I was like, what does their out of conference schedule look like? Do they schedule a bunch of out of conference games to like, pad the streak? They schedule a bunch of NAIA teams so that they can like beat up on guys. So they have like extra games to add on, so they make that streak look good. And I didn't go back any years. I only looked at this year, but they only had 2 out of conference games. And then they won their 4 conference games. So like, okay, great. That sounds pretty, they haven't lost. So it's not as if they're like, so good for them. They care a lot about all of their athletic programs. Like it actually took me a while to find their football program, the one with the streak, because I'm just like navigating around this athletics. And that is a problem with their navigation, by the way. So it's not a pure compliment, but along the way, they were like highlighting their athletics hall of fame, which included like track stars and like swimmers and like the national champions that they've had over the years. That's really cool. So I was gonna hate it, but it was tough going through the website looking for reasons to hate. But at some point, they should probably find a way to move up to Division 2. Now, I say that about NDSU all the time. One of the reasons NDSU doesn't do it is logistical. Very difficult to get the stadium and seating capacity needed to be a Division 1 team, or an FBS team, I should say. And there may be huge logistical constraints to move up from Division 3 to Division 2 that are a little bit different than the constraints for NDSU, which, like, you have the money to do it. Don't lie to me. Maybe not after this year.
It's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, maybe not. We'll see. We'll see how many losses NDSU piles up this year. They already lost to the Aztecs and the Fighting Hawks. Now they got the Jackrabbits. It's not looking good.
I was going to wait until after the question, but I feel like now's the appropriate time. to allow you to not only dunk on NDSU, but we can also talk about how dominant JMU has been this year, because JMU is just going out and taking names at this point, just rubbing it in everyone's faces.
So they're scoring point after point after point, but also their defense is out of control. They held Georgia State to like 6 points for almost or Georgia Southern to almost 6 points for almost the entire game until the final moments. Allowed another 7 points, 13 points, 42-13 or something crazy like that. They are crazy. They're so good. And they appeared on the AP national poll as the top non-receiving votes team. So non-receiving votes are basically 26. That's awesome. Not a ton of G5 guys up there. It's like UCF. The thing is, they're doing all of this while they are ineligible to win their conference and ineligible for a bowl game, right? They're already bowl qualified, but they can't go because of the movement up rules, which sucks. JMU has a bunch of money coming in anyway, so they don't need the bowl season to make it all worth it. But man, I love how well they're playing, and I love that they're playing hard, and I love that they're playing at the level that they need to play without bullying anyone.
Yeah.
Right?
This has been... It was so much fun to watch them on... It was ESPN2 this week. ESPN, I believe, coming up here, and then ESPNU immediately afterwards for Homecoming, where they're facing Old Dominion. So
they scheduled a division game for Homecoming.
Yeah.
Goodness.
They are absolutely all about this life. Good for them. They are
awesome.
Absolutely rocking it right now. And NDSU, boy. I didn't go to the game because I was sitting at home with my son watching the JMU game, and then but this was remarkable. This had the Fighting Hawks, UND proper, have not beaten the Bison in 20 years, and they demolished them in every side of the ball. It was never close. The Bison are not good this year, and UND of all teams took them out and just beat them badly. Oh
yeah. I mean, UND is the power in the state right now. You can't deny that.
I mean, after that game.
Can't deny that.
Oh, it was so...
Yeah, you can only mess around with the home school of Jim Kleinsasser so much.
I love that somebody asked you about if this was if you were pro UND or just anti NDSU or pro JMU, where did this start? And your answer was just yes.
Okay, so by the way, I did receive an email from somebody who was from the Virginia area. I don't remember exactly if they said that they attended JMU. I don't think they did, but they are very aware of JMU. They were very local to JMU. And so they were really surprised to hear James Madison just mentioned offhandedly. And he's where does this come from? I suspect it's a bit, which by the way, a lot of people who encounter this bit in the wild think it's 100% genuine. A lot of people think I went to JMU. There are a number of people at JMU.
We did post a bunch of pictures when we went there of you posing with various things on the campus.
I still have all of I should put that up behind me. I still have all of the JMU merch.
All the alum merch you picked up?
The alum merch, specifically the alum merch. The mug that says JMU alum. The keychain that says JMU alum.
Mine doesn't say alum, but it does say JMU.
And then I've also got the normal JMU, the JMU pendants and stuff. So I got to find those and put them up on the little wall that I have behind me. But anyway, to answer your question, I did not attend JMU. Again, this was not the impression that we gave to a lot of people at JMU at the homecoming game that we attended against the Campbell Camels.
No, in fact, we specifically said you've never attended. It's a bit on our show how you're an honorary alum and how much you hate NDSU, and all you needed to say was you hated NDSU, and we were in.
Yeah, they adopted us.
Yeah, let me tell you all of the stories about everything going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, like one guy was like, "Oh, okay, so you didn't attend, but you're pretending like you attended." Okay, well, here's how you get away with it. So over there, that hill, that hill is now a rec center, but when you attended, it was just a hill that you played football on. And I was like, "That's right, man.
Yep.
I remember."
Shout out to Kevin Jellerson.
It was so good. But yeah, so it was because I grew up in Grand Forks, North Dakota, where that's the home of UND, and the rival for the Potato Bowl was NDSU.
Not for the Potato Bowl, just for the Buffalo Nickel, but yes.
For the Buffalo Nickel, yeah. Was NDSU, and I hated NDSU, and it's just like any good Grand Forks kid would. And then later in life, when I got back into football, they were good at football, and I couldn't handle it. It would also be funny to hate the team that everyone loved, these lovable upstarts that are taking on like Kansas and regrettably Minnesota and all these other like actual FBS, not just FBS, like Power 5 FBS teams, and beating them. And everyone's like, oh my God, NDSU, these plucky upstarts. And I was like, I hate them. I'm rooting against them every time.
I hate them, and their quarterback is a ginger, and I'm against him.
I don't think Brock Jensen was a ginger.
I was referring to the quarterback that was starting at a different. Yes.
Yeah.
I enjoyed, by the way, responding to Eric Thompson's thing about NDSU with just a gif of Carson Wentz giving a thumbs up in a Colts outfit. I was like, oh, so this is just. Ugh.
So yeah, hating NDSU is a bit. JMU beat NDSU in the national championship. Became a JMU fan for life. That I've always been because I attended. Go Dukes. I love Charles Haley, Duke alum.
And we had a fantastic bit on the show that appeared in one of the Christmas episodes, along with a bonus one, I imagine, where we talked about your speech for graduation, your commencement address, and what came from that. So it all stems from these things. And if you get a chance, you should find that JMU. The JMU commencement address. It is one of the best bits of a reef that has ever been aired on Norse Code.
So yeah, thank you for emailing me. Sorry I didn't respond to your email, but it was very funny. And in this counts as a response.
Yeah. So next question is from a Hyundai for one is a Hyundai for all of us.
No, it's not. That's not how that works. That's a car.
It's what else should we nickel and dime Dave into drawing? So 38 people helped Dropblade Dave, raise $50 in order to draw something that Mark Sanchez said aloud that even I'm not entirely sure what it's supposed to, like. I kind of get it, but it's not something you say aloud. And Mark Sanchez said something along the lines of Jalen Hurts is as hard to take down, or is as elusive as a salmon in Vaseline. And
Mark, you poet.
I clearly. And so someone had messaged Dropplay Dave and said, how much for you to draw this? I have to know. And his response was, all right, you know what? Fine, $50. I think this is funny. And the guy sent $2. Dave's response was to draw a singular eye, and said, "Now the price is $48 in order to get this down." Now I saw it apparently third, and I sent $350.
Yeah,
and everyone else proceeded to microtransaction him to death.
Yeah, it was great because he got the second transaction. He was like, "All right, time to draw another eye," and then you sent one, and then a bunch of. And I thought it was like funny that people were sending like $2, $3, $3.50, and I was like, "Oh, it'd be very funny if I just sent 70. Will Venmo let me send 75 cents?" Answer's yes.
It turns out yes, which was great.
And we did it. 38 transactions. It was like $54, $52, something like that, and he drew it.
Yep, it was amazing, and I don't know what else we can say. As far as what do we nickel and dime him in order to draw next? I mean, clearly it has to be a merch idea. I want to put this on a shirt, but it's so evil and cursed. I can't imagine. See, I look at merch differently now that we've been doing the show for so long. I have to look at merch and go, would this look good on a baby onesie? And I don't know if it would.
So the biggest issue that I have with Threadless is that they do look very good on baby onesies, except for the balaclava / beard. But they don't size up on the hoodies for whatever reason. So some of the sweaters look great. The sweater sizing, the logo on that looks great. Some of the hoodies and some of the styles, I don't love the size on them. So that's the only thing. So it actually is a better heuristic for us to be like, would this look good on a baby onesie?
Yeah.
than anything else. Which that is a very broken way to think about it. In terms of merch, I think it would. The car story has dominated this arc.
Mm-hmm.
So something involving the car, we can't like on merch put a Hyundai logo or use the word Hyundai, right? Like you're hitting shaky ground there. But this is so funny. Someone posted an image in the Discord, like right before we started recording, of Lucy holding a football and Charlie Brown ready to kick it. And instead of Charlie Brown, it was my face. Instead of Lucy's face, it was the Minneapolis Police Department. And instead of a football, it was my car.
Yes, this is absolutely a thing.
So good. It was so, I died and I was like, this is like it can't be mean because I enjoyed it and I'm encouraging it. But man, in another context, that would be so cruel and rude. Which is part of the reason it's so funny, right? So something that evokes that would be tragically wonderful merch. Maybe a ghost garage. I don't know.
Nessie as a hood ornament for a car.
That's funny. I like that. Well, I would like to sell Nessie hood ornaments, just generally. That would be funny too. Yeah. Be hard, but yeah.
I'm taking Nessie out to the West Coast this weekend, so I'm looking forward to Nessie finding its way to another ocean. Also, from a Hyundai for one, as a Hyundai for all of us, does Arif ever listen to Creed to get pumped up for his wide left articles?
I can't imagine something that would make me write less. I don't have. I would probably more likely get pumped up by Nickelback right before I write away. Like I'd be like, yeah, bottom of the bottle. That's rough. You're right. Okay, time to talk about fumbles. Right? Like okay, fine. I could do Nickelback, but I'm turning to Switchfoot. That's what happens when that happens.
Yeah, famously turning to Switchfoot. From Cody, who asks, for a Reef's Medical Corner, per Luke Bronze, please. I recently ordered the Jace Medical Emergency Antibiotics Kit. I accidentally ate them like they were snacks and have apparently developed a superbug according to my holistic doctor. Now that doctor, while Arif is dying, that doctor and I had a falling out.
Very thematically appropriate for me to die.
Exactly. This is you dying on podcast would absolutely make great content.
But you'd have to put that behind the paywall. That's
killer content. That's terrible. I accidentally ate them like they were snacks and have apparently developed a superbug, according to my holistic doctor. That doctor and I had a falling out, so due to my desperate state, I am forced to rely on Arif for holistic or overall medical advice. What should I do to treat this superbug? Any holistic approaches that could help? Potentially turmeric.
So first of all, no. But second of all, you do research into probably other mammalian mating sounds, I think is probably the direction that you want to head in. So obviously dolphins for ligature, tendon, that kind of stuff. I would imagine something kind of analogous for for muscles. Now, wolves and dolphins have a common ancestor. I don't know if like holistic medicine people believe in evolution. Let's, for the sake of convenience, say that they do. So wolves and dolphins have a shared ancestor. So I'd say maybe wolf mating noises for muscles. This is more granular and specific. So I would say probably blind moles. That if you could find that mating sound, I imagine that will resolve your superbug problem.
It's possible. Or, I mean, you're dealing with a sickness right now. Do you feel as if your illness is being cured by the sound of a cat in heat wailing? Does that help?
I wouldn't know anything about that, James.
Not at all, huh? Not dealing with that
Nope.
at all.
Nope.
Are we literally not talking about the cat in the corner of the room?
Okay, first of all, the cat's not in the room.
Well, no. If the cat was in the room, we'd be able to hear it. More so.
Okay, so for like 2 weeks, this cat is... Well, okay. For a period of about a week and a half, 3 weeks ago, this cat was going off, right? And like my roommate's like, yeah, we haven't fixed her yet. And I'm like, clearly, Jesus Christ. And like, it's so uncomfortable, right? The cat really needs it, right? Like, it's just like, I am not here for this. Don't want to do this. One of the roommates was like, hey, so I looked up online that you can get a cat out of here. I was like, don't tell me. Don't want to know. It's like, I get it. It's medical. It's not like weird, but I don't need to think about this. And the cat disagrees. The cat very much thinks I need to think about this. Now, the cat is mostly out of it, except like every other day at night is just like, I wasn't satisfied. I need to be satisfied. And I'm like, nope, not doing this. Closing the door. We're not talking. We're not in conversation.
Noise canceling headphones. Some Switchfoot loud. Like, we're falling
so I got sick during. So clearly the cat thing isn't doing it. So
okay. Well, I figured I would ask because this is something you're around. So I just want to double check.
Yeah. Well, my research suggests otherwise. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it's important that you're doing your own research.
God damn it.
So, we've got 2 more questions here. This next one's a little more serious than you'd expect for the end of the show. Logan asks, question for a Reef's DraftKings free bet corner. I realize this may be my conservative Lutheran upbringing, but I feel uncomfortable with the proliferation of gambling and specifically gambling advertising. It's nice that they always have addiction warnings at the end, but the gambling adverts and access seems worse than with alcohol, for example. Alcohol, a person needs to leave the house to go somewhere to purchase, like that. Whereas gambling can all be done on your phone now, and it's advertised/blasted at you on anything, quote, man-related, podcasts, YouTube, general sports viewing, etc. Plus, they have free samples, which just seems to be designed to spur addiction. I don't have an addiction, but I'm hearing DraftKings ads on Behind the Bastards podcast, and man, is it shocking. Am I just a Puritan? What are your thoughts on the sudden growth and access to sports gambling?
So I listened to Behind the Bastards and its corollary podcast, It Could Happen Here, which should not come as a shock to anybody familiar with either of those 2 podcasts. They advertise basically anything, so that should not be a surprise to you. Like, they hate true crime, and like half the advertisements on their podcast are like for other true crime or for other podcasts that are true crime podcasts. So like, it's ads. So that one doesn't shock me. I wouldn't say that one is like, oh my God, even Behind the Bastards. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, especially Behind the Bastards. That makes sense. But I would say that, yeah, I think that it's like a bigger concern than I think that we're comfortable with. Like, so I've been a huge, like, we should, make sure that we like legalize sports betting because it's unregulated. You're dealing with like shady bookies. People are doing stuff overseas. And it is hard to be transparent about because people are still gambling on sports. First of all, they're doing it in Las Vegas, right? And in Atlantic City. But they're also like bookies have a ton of influence, right? And so it's not as if you're avoiding corruption. And I don't think all of those are necessarily wrong now that we're like 2 years in, I think. seeing the athletes get suspended for like unrelated but funny gambling violations, or ones that like feel right, like, oh, but he just bet on his team to win type stuff, is like, okay, yeah, whatever, right? The system is working fine. That's cool, right? Because now casinos are above board. They have an incentive to look above board, so they voluntarily report when anybody who seems to be an athlete is gambling. That's great, right? So from that perspective, it's fine, but I don't think that we did a good enough job dealing with like the mental health ramifications of it, how crippling a gambling addiction can be and stuff like that. And that might be like a tough, we just have to go through it, right? I don't know. But the ease of access thing, I did not do a very good job anticipating, and that one does seem to accelerate addiction. Anybody who's familiar with like what are called gotcha games, GACHA, which are essentially like, you hear a lot about like loot boxes and gambling and stuff like that in games like CSGO and Fortnite, where you spend real money to get like a crate of items you don't know what's in, but there's like a probability that you've got an epic or rare or whatever item. But most of the time it's like an uncommon, or even worse, a common item. And so maybe enough common items together, whatever, right? Like it depends on the loot box system. Overwatch did it. EA does loot boxes all over the place. Well, mobile games had their version of that before loot boxes ever became popular, and now they're more insidious than ever, and they rely on like cognitive tricks that take advantage of like quirks in human psychology, right? That exploit essentially a loot box type system, along with like advancement mechanisms, the things that are in idle games that for whatever reason seem to work on people. All of those things are the case already on our phones, and they can be crippling. Like people without a ton of income will spend like hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars on these gotcha games, right? And so, yeah, I mean, like that is something that should have been anticipated, given that environment for microtransactions already existed. And so it is concerning, but I don't think the solution is to ban it, because I think people will continue to find access to it. Now, mind you, keeping it out in the open made it super easy to access, so a bunch more people have their eyes on it, which increases the number of potential, like, I don't know, victims is the right word, but sure, victims of gambling addiction. And so, that it's not as if I'm making the argument, well, you can't ban it because then people are still going to find it anyway. There's a volume thing there, but I'm just saying that like when it's out in the open, you could do a better job of dealing with it, because it's not as crippling as a chemical addiction, right? It's not as if like, oh, we shouldn't restrict opiates, because if we do, then we'll have a harder time dealing with the addiction. That doesn't make any sense. But I think with gambling, it does, because it's like a psychological addiction that might be a little bit easier to deal with. And hey, any addiction experts, feel free to correct me. I'd love to be corrected on this specific issue. But yeah, I don't know how much help the warnings are, but I think that having them independent of the ads would be a great start. Like, I think you just run them as ads. But hey, you suffer from gambling addiction? Oh God. I think actually this weekend, Kurt Warner did a couple of ads.
I was literally about to mention that. Kurt Warner was on a couple of ads that was just, hey, don't gamble, do not chase it. If you have a problem, if you can't pay for it, you shouldn't gamble. Like, it was actually
set limits, only gamble what you're ready to lose, don't chase your losses. 3 great pieces of advice, no advertisement for a gambling service. And it started with, hey, 24% of the time the team with the lead in the fourth quarter loses, or it's like 42% of the time. 24% of the time a game is decided by 3 points or less. Football is unpredictable. It happens, right? So it's like a great way to do the ad. So that's great. More of that, I think, would be great. Also, like, hey, gambling addiction's real. It's not embarrassing. Here's a number. Trust me. Bunch of people are going through it. Take control of your life, sort of stuff. So yeah, but that was great. But there wasn't a ton of that, in my experience anyway, before like this weekend. So more of that.
I'm finding it interesting, and I'm doing the whole like as a parent thing for the moment. So apologies if this gets weird. I was watching a lot of football this weekend with my son, who's 10, and there's so much gambling stuff. Now, admittedly, it's not like when Daily Fantasy was damn near every commercial. That was obnoxious.
Crazy.
That was I've never seen anything like it. I don't think I'll ever see anything like that since. Like in the future. That was ridiculous. If you didn't live through that football season, the first couple weeks of it, I don't know what to tell you. It was something to see. It was every commercial for the first like 6 weeks, 4 weeks of the season was just DFS. And it killed DFS. Like it killed interest in it. Is nobody wanted to see the ads anymore.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
And the ads created like a blowback. Like more people were writing articles that were like, you cannot win at DFS.
Yeah.
Like you don't do this, it's a trap, you'll lose. And they wouldn't have done that if the ads were cut by 75%. And I imagine it would have been just as effective getting new users in. So it did create a really weird bubble for them.
Yeah.
That was really self-sustained and fueled, which I'm so lucky I came out net positive on DFS. That's crazy looking back that I was like, yeah, I made like a couple thousand on that.
Yeah. Remember when the guy who was in charge of like fantasy, I think it was Kevin Barry, the guy who was in charge of fantasy for ESPN, like it came out that he had a deal with DFS like organizations too. Like it got weird there for a while.
Yeah,
it was remarkable. But as the father of a 10-year-old, I'm sitting there like having to explain like the gambling thing to my son, which I don't have a problem with explaining it, but it is on every commercial like 2 or 3 times at this point. Like I can only explain why Jamie Foxx is on the TV so many times a day. Like I can only do that. And it's not like it's because of a movie or Ray or whatever. He's always on. It's starting to get to that point. It's not quite at the DFS point where it was every commercial, but it's feeling like it at this point. It's a bit rough. Not a complaint, not a like, I want this. Like it's something. And as a parent, I'm dealing with it, but it's still annoying. Let's go to Damian Barrett, who has 2 important questions. Number 1, why do Hell League teams consistently raise their games against when facing a Reef? In his 5 losses this year, he has faced teams putting up over 300 points on average. Does he see regression coming, or is this just another example of the universe repaying all of his debate karma?
Do you think I had debate karma? I would have won way more debates. I do not consider myself as somebody who benefited from debate karma. Goodness. I frequently people would tell me that I got like, this is not anyway. So I'm 1-4 in the the original Hell League. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Yes,
because they're all Hell Leagues now.
It's all Hell Leagues all the way down.
So in points against, I have the highest points against versus me in the original Hell League, and I rank 3rd in the other Hell League that I'm participating in. It is brutal. Teams are targeting me. They are coaching everybody. It's like playing Colorado, right? Everybody is hyped to play against me. The trash talk among the players and coaches is unbearable. It's getting personal. And I wish I could complain about it in a more legitimate way, but in points scored, I'm like second to last. So who cares, right? Like, oh God, everybody's scoring the most points against me. Well, if it was average, I'd still be 1-4. So it's not like much I can do to be like, yeah, I'm getting screwed here. I got to coach my defense better. I don't know, but I'm not scoring many points. So it kind of doesn't matter. You know, when you draft Justin Tucker, you expect him to make some friggin' kicks. It's like, hey, we got the best kicker in history. Should we, maybe punt from the 50? Yeah, why not? We've never done that in the history of our organization. But, we like our punter. And it's like, we like your kicker. He's the best kicker in history. He kicked a 68-yarder like not that long ago. Kicked 50, man.
Yeah.
And then they finally do it, and he gets an extra point blocked. Well, the only touchdown scored by the Ravens that game says because he gets blocked. Goodness.
Yeah, if not for his extra, if not for his field goal yardage, I would have had no yardage at all. Also from Damian Barrett. For James's relationship corner, just how many oysters should one order on a first date? And how many justifies bailing if your date goes over? So we should explain that the oyster woman is somebody who is been on TikTok and on Twitter being roasted over the coals, or raked over the coals rather, about she had walked into a date. Her language is a little bit more colorful than I will be at this particular moment. She's going on a date and apparently had told the guy she wasn't interested. He was meeting up for drinks. She shows up and proceeds to order a bunch of food, specifically 4 plates of oysters.
$15 each.
And is filming this with her phone.
The whole time.
Flash on. Like, you can see the reflection of it on the plate as she's doing this. Flash on just houses these plates of oysters. And he eventually gets up around the 3rd or 4th plate and pieces out. Goes to the bathroom, never comes back. And she is upset, is like, doesn't understand why he left.
And like stuck her with the bill, right?
Yeah.
And like,
which good.
And so she's like, right. And she's like, wow, leaving and sticking me with the tab is crazy. And he's like, when I said we were going to meet for drinks, I thought it was just going to be drinks and you ordered food. And like, that's kind of being polite because she ordered a ton of food and expected him to pay for it when that was not on the docket. And it was, again, 4 plates, $15 oysters, which there's like 12 oysters a plate. It's not like a bad deal.
But it ends up sharing either.
And yeah, she wasn't sharing. So it's like, so she gets like the 4 plates of oysters. She gets this like, honestly, like delicious looking like butter potato thing. She's got these crab cakes. Like there's a lot going on, right? You're paying a lot for this date if you're paying, right? This guy decided I'm not. And I also, like, my understanding, the way that people talked about this on Twitter is that she at some point had indicated that she wasn't even interested in him, which is just like, why would he stick her? Like, what? Come on.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, so yeah. So, I mean, you know, you still have to, like, you still have to go through the process. Like, I think I'd said, like, in the pre-show, like, this is, you know, even like going to Disneyland, you still have to go in the line. Even if you get the express pass, you still have a line to go through. Yeah, and hey, fast pass may not be fast, but it's a pass. You got to do the thing. Yeah, you are. You're on this thing. Like, this is. You can't get the free meal. We're all in the party, right? We're all playing the role, right? Yeah. Just fulfill your obligation of the social contract. First of all, have a conversation. Like, it very clearly, you were just. You can't have a conversation if you're housing 48 oysters. With your phone out the whole time. Your phone out recording with the flash on the whole time. Can you imagine trying to, like, and I understand, like, it's been a while since I've dated, right? But I can't imagine trying to have a conversation with somebody where you're trying to be a little bit personal, a little bit intimate. It's a first date, so yeah, you don't want to get into too much. But like, you're being a little bit vulnerable. You're putting yourself out there. The person's recording the whole time? Nope, not for me. I'm out. Like, that's nuts. So. Yeah, okay. So obviously, and so everyone on the internet's like, well, she's clearly in the wrong. The crazy thing to me, right, because I saw this on Twitter. So, like, the person who uploaded it on Twitter was not the person to the date, and the caption made it pretty clear. So no one was, like, bullying this person. So, like, the tweet went viral. I saw the videos. I saw a little bit of the context, at least as far as I understood. And then James was like, hey, did you hear about Oyster Girl? And I was like, I don't know what you mean, but that sounds familiar. Why not? And immediately he sends a link. And just from the headline in the link, I was like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. But I clicked the headline anyway to see if, like, maybe there's some additional context. And the original TikTok is embedded in the article, which means she never deleted that, which is wild to me. Like, the level of disconnect between, like, all kinds of heat. Yeah. The level of disconnect between, like, I'm not wrong here and I should have shame. Like, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. There's no connection there at all. And she could probably never go back to that. It looked like a sweet spot. She probably blew that spot up. Mm-hmm. And that was actually the original comment on the Twitter thing was, I'm actually upset that they told people about my favorite spot to eat oysters in, like, Atlanta or wherever it was. That's fair. That place looked good. So that oyster deal's not bad. Yeah, right? Like, I think the Manny's oysters were more than that, and they were quite good, but... Yeah. They were very good. And we shared. Like, the three of us shared. No one had their phones out for more than, like, a second.
Like,
yeah, we took like a picture of the food. We didn't like narrate our eating experience
of that. No, that we saved that for steak. Or the whiskey. I don't remember which. But the point is like, no, I've never had a date where somebody proceeded to go that off the script as far as food was concerned. Like that is like, if you say you're meeting for drinks, you can still have an expectation of like, maybe I'm going to get something. Maybe I'll share.
Right.
Or, hey, do you mind if I get something?
And that's like a read the room kind of thing too, right? Like, yeah, and you got to be like, hey, you want to split nap? And if they're like not into it, they're like, hey, I just want to keep this casual. Like, hey, meet them at their energy, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
But like, you got to check in, and you don't like got to commit. Like, hey, awesome, glad we met for drinks. How do you feel about a 4-course meal at this bar? Like,
here's my other thing, and I was discussing this with someone earlier tonight. Who gets seconds of an appetizer? Like, I realize it's on special, but who gets seconds of an appetizer? Can you imagine a situation where you're like, you know what? Can we get another set of mozzarella sticks out here, please? Cool, thanks. Like, the idea of getting a second appetizer is not uncommon. It can happen. We're just keeping things light, tapas or whatever, like, fine. Getting a full plate, like, can you imagine going out to Applebee's and being like, going out to Applebee's and like, I need another one of the appetizer platters? Like, we housed this one, and I'm afraid we need at least. Yeah, we're definitely gonna need we're gonna need the whole platter. Like, no,
I'm gonna need the whole. That's what I'm
gonna need the whole platter.
And my pal over there is like still drinking a beer.
Yeah,
right? I'm like going to town on like the artichoke dip, the great what crazy the Anytizer wings or whatever Applebee's calls them.
Yeah,
right. Like
the wings or the boneless wings and the I hate that I know this artichoke dip, the quesadilla. I think there's like chips and salsa in there as well. Like, yeah.
Well, I also remember the artichoke dip. I guess that stands out. Good job, Applebee's. The artichoke dip is memorable and, in my opinion, kind of good. But it's been like a couple of years.
I've never been on a date where somebody went that far off. But like,
yeah, that's why. And you've been on crazy dates.
And you know what? I've been on some ridiculous stuff, and that date itself would not enter my top 3 as the worst, but it would definitely like be it would fight. Yeah, for most bizarre, it would fight in for the 3 or 4. Like it would fight in, like it would be in that spot. It wouldn't be number 1. Definitely wouldn't be number 1 or number 2. But it would definitely the 3 or 4. Yeah, I could see that. I've never had that experience. That would be weird. But the idea of somebody ordering seconds on an appetizer is just ridiculous to me. And maybe I just don't eat enough oysters. Like maybe fine. Maybe she was trying to work herself up to a situation or something. I don't know. But if you're eating that,
well, yeah. If the person that you're seeing can like tolerate that, then I guess you've landed in the situation you want. But that's a crazy thing to expect.
Yeah.
You're like stress testing a dude so that you could like abuse him later, because that's what it sounds like is going to be her relationship dynamic, right? If you're like stress testing to see if that's going to work, like, first of all, don't. No power to you. But I guess I sort of understand. But like, you were surprised it didn't work.
Yeah.
Like, this is like you're doing like a filter course, right? You're like a pre-med student. Like, you got to get through OChem, right? That's what and you're surprised people are failing. You made it the most difficult course. What are you doing? Like, this is nuts.
So to answer your question as to how many oysters should one order on a first date, somewhere between 0 and 1 plates, I feel like is an appropriate amount. How many justifies bailing if your date goes over? I think I've come to the conclusion that if you get seconds, I'm gonna raise an eyebrow and be like, is this what you're gonna be eating? Like, if this is what you're gonna be eating tonight, fine. But like, I am gonna ask a question, and it's gonna seem ruder than I like mean it to. but I need to know your level of involvement and what's about to happen. Are you going to try for a record?
Right. Hey, what are we in for?
Yeah. And if on the first date a third order of oysters comes out, I'm bailing.
Well, again, only if it's like unilateral, right? Like you're sharing the oysters and you're both like, man, those oysters are really good. They're really cheap. And then she goes, oh, let's get, another plate. Well, first of all, that puts it in your court, right? Because you could be like, yes or no, right? So it's like a different if the collaborative process plays out, right? But this is like, again, it needs to be emphasized. She's doing this on her own. She's just going in and there is no coalition of the willing on these oysters, right? It's a
unilateral decision. She's going in alone. She's not sending in anyone as far as Hans Blix is nowhere to be found.
Right. Poland is not participating, right?
Famously, I don't care who gets upset with me. Poland is not participating.
Yeah. No one forgot Poland. She's just going in on these oysters alone, orders another one without input from you. It's time to bail.
Yep, that's absolutely the time to do it. Time to leave. I'm sitting here. I'm honestly trying to think if someone ever did something that I know. I accidentally got a little drunk on a date before, but that was different. Like that wasn't.
I've been on weird dates. I've been on bad dates. Nothing that ever rises to the level that would enter into consideration for your top 20 in either of those categories. But which, that's just a product of having been with one person for a very long time, I'm sure. But also your life is crazy. So both, right? But I don't think I've
I've been on a date with someone who thought birds weren't real, and I still would prefer that over the woman who's going to eat all the oysters and film them on TikTok.
I did end up. I did not think it was a date, and she definitely did. And I also learned in that date, not date, that she was stalking me, right? And this is before I had a public presence, right? This is before I was like, hey, I want to be a journalist. I want people to know my name and all that. This was just I'm in college. She knows what my parents' names are. Never told her, right? This is in the proto Facebook era. So it's not all her information is just out there, right? This is she went to phone books, right? She is. And she had stuff to tell me about my life that I had never shared with her, right? That was creepy. That was obviously a bit, but I didn't consider it a date. She was like, hey, do you want to hang out? Right. And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? Maybe I should have read the signs. I was in college, right? And so I had a friend, I was texting my friend, and this is when I still had to pay individually for text. I was using T9 and I was like, I'm in danger. Right. And
a thing I'm laughing at. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It was I was probably not really in danger, but that's not a risk I want to take, right? I'm not going to play the odds, right? Okay, yeah, if the dice lands on 6, I'm dead, but most of the time I'll be fine. I don't want to play those odds. So I'm texting my friend, I'm like, hey, I did not realize that this was on the table. This is nuts, right? And I knew this person for a while, so it wasn't but it was a loose acquaintance. We weren't friends. There's no reason she would know where I live or what my parents' names were, or disturbingly what my cousins' names were. Get out of here. And it wasn't she did not play it off endearingly. There was no, okay, we have a similar chemistry. I'm willing to overlook some stuff and make some bad decisions. Nothing like that, right? So I'm texting this person and wasting my texts, 150 texts or 100 texts. And this is going weird. And I'm explaining the situation to her. And she's like, so you have not indicated that this is a date, right? And I was like, yeah, definitely not. And she has kind of not let you know, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess, but it's very clear that that's what's happening, right? And she's like, well, so it wouldn't be weird if, for example, you brought up a girlfriend. And I was like, Yeah, I mean, you're right, but that sounds like the danger part, right? That sounds like it's not dangerous now, but it could get, and that sounds like where it gets dangerous. And she's like, well, you got to get out, right? And I was like, yeah, how about I pick you up and I act like I'm your girlfriend? Turns out, by the way, that was a sign. That person did want to date me. We did end up like that. I didn't see that right away. I'm an idiot, but she did want to be my girlfriend. That did end up happening for about a year. So that worked out fine. But at the time she was rescuing me, I didn't realize there was like another like, hey, I'm kind of into you. Let's not like pretend, you know? But at the time she was like, you got to pretend that I'm your girlfriend. This is like your way out. And I was like, you're right. Pick me up.
Capital ID, old sport. Let's do it.
That was nuts. But that's like not like that situation like happens to people, right? The oyster thing doesn't happen to be. That's crazy.
Nope. She got what she deserved, apparently, which she still thinks she's been wronged, so she gets to deal with that.
All right.
That is the end of this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Arif, what do you have to plug?
All right, so over at the Wide Left Substack, I already mentioned that we've got a review of the game up there. And I say we because very soon we're going to be restarting the Wide Left podcast. Might as well announce it now. Me and Ben Natan will be discussing both football and politics, which is what we discussed way back in like 2017 when that podcast originally ran. That's going to be exciting. It's not going to be for a little bit, so hold on. But that's coming soon, and I've got some rebranding in the works too, so to get all of that branding together. In the meantime, I do want to write a little bit about the Vikings defense because the things I mentioned, that it's getting a little bit better. So that should be fun. That should be coming up soon. I will be traveling a little bit this weekend, so hopefully that's not going to change my output, but that's something to kind of keep in mind.
And next week's episodes are going to be kind of arranged in a funny way, so we'll work on getting those out as well. But for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much, and please remember that maybe just put that in a garage next time. And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.